My sister slapped me across the face at her wedding in front of 250 guests because I refused to give her my yacht. She thought everyone would laugh, but a judge in the crowd stood up and changed everything. I, 33M, watched my sister's perfectly manicured hand connect with my face in front of 250 wedding guests, and in that moment, I knew our family would never be the same. The sting spread across my cheek like wildfire, but what burned worse was the expectant silence that followed. She stood there in her $7,000 dress, hands still raised, waiting for the laughter she'd choreographed in her mind. The crowd at the Newport Beach Yacht Club shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Nobody laughed. I should back up. My sister and I grew up in a modest three-bedroom house in suburban California. Our parents were teachers who saved every penny they could, instilling in us the value of hard work and education. She took those lessons and twisted them into something ugly, believing that success meant taking shortcuts, manipulating people, and always looking for the easy way up. I took them literally. I worked 3 jobs through college, built a software consulting business from my apartment, and after 15 years of 80-hour weeks, I'd finally made it. The yacht was my reward to myself, purchased 6 months earlier after closing a deal that set me up for life. She'd married into money. Her husband came from old wealth, the kind that's been accumulating interest for 4 generations. They threw money around like confetti, but it was always his family's money, never hers. That distinction ate at her. 3 months before the wedding, she called me with what she described as a simple request. She wanted to borrow the yacht for her honeymoon. 2 weeks sailing the Mediterranean, completely free, just siblings helping each other out. I explained that the yacht was already chartered for those exact dates. I had corporate clients paying premium rates, and I'd signed contracts. She laughed it off, said she understood, and I thought that was the end of it. 2 months before the wedding, she called again. This time, she wanted me to cancel the charter. She'd done the math, she said, and she'd pay me what I would have made from the clients. I explained it wasn't about the money. It was about my reputation, my business relationships, and the legal implications of breaking a contract. She hung up without saying goodbye. 1 month before the wedding, she stopped calling and started telling people I'd promised her the yacht. Family members reached out, confused about why I was being difficult. Our mother called, asking why I couldn't just help my sister on her special day. I tried to explain the situation, but my sister had already painted me as the selfish brother who'd rather make money than celebrate family. The week of the wedding, she sent me a text message. It wasn't a request anymore. She informed me that she'd told all her guests about the yacht honeymoon, posted about it on social media, and had it printed in the wedding program. She expected me to make it happen. I called her immediately and told her I couldn't and wouldn't break a legal contract. She told me I was ruining her wedding and that I'd regret it. I should have known she wasn't bluffing. The wedding itself was excessive in every possible way. Ice sculptures, a 20-piece orchestra, flowers flown in from Ecuador. Her husband's family had spared no expense, and my sister basked in it like she'd earned every penny herself. I sat at a table near the back with our parents, watching her hold court like royalty. The reception started normally enough. Speeches were made, champagne was poured, the first dance happened without incident. Then came the toast from the maid of honor, and I noticed my sister whispering something to her. The maid of honor's expression changed, and she wrapped up her speech quickly. My sister stood up, microphone in hand, and I felt my stomach drop. She started by thanking everyone for coming, for celebrating her love, for being part of her perfect day. Then her tone shifted. She talked about family, about how families should always support each other, about how some people valued money over relationships. The crowd grew quiet. She looked directly at me. She told everyone about the yacht, about how I'd purchased it with money I'd made from my business, about how she'd asked to borrow it for her honeymoon, about how I'd refused because I valued a paycheck more than her happiness. She twisted every fact, reframed every conversation, and painted me as a greedy, heartless brother who couldn't spare 2 weeks to make his sister's dreams come true. The crowd murmured. I felt eyes turning toward me. Our mother grabbed my hand under the table. Then my sister did something I still can't quite believe. She invited me to stand up. She called me to the front of the room. Her voice was sweet, encouraging, like she was giving me a chance to redeem myself in front of everyone. She said I could make this right. I could announce that I'd changed my mind, that family came first, that she could have the yacht. I sat frozen for a moment, then slowly stood up. I walked through the silent crowd to where she stood at the head table. She smiled at me, confident and cruel, Microphone extended like a peace offering. I took the microphone and told the truth. I explained that the yacht was chartered through a binding contract. I explained that I'd offered alternative solutions, helping pay for a different yacht, arranging a luxury cruise, contributing to their honeymoon in other ways. I explained that she'd refused all of it because she specifically wanted to take something that was mine. I kept my voice steady and factual, laying out the timeline of conversations and her escalating demands. The crowd's murmuring changed tone. People were looking at my sister now. Not me. That's when she slapped me. The sound echoed through the yacht club like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side, and the microphone fell from my hand, hitting the floor with a screech of feedback. For a moment, everything stopped. The orchestra mid-note, the waiters mid-step, 250 people mid-breath. She laughed. It was high-pitched and nervous, and she gestured to the crowd like she expected them to join in, like this was all part of some elaborate joke they were supposed to understand. She said something about me needing to lighten up, about sibling rivalry, about how I always took things too seriously. Nobody laughed. An older man stood up from a table near the front. I didn't know him, but his presence commanded immediate attention. He was probably in his 60s, gray hair, expensive suit, the kind of quiet authority that comes from decades of being listened to. He identified himself as Judge Morrison, a family friend of the groom's parents, and said he needed to address what had just happened. His voice was calm but carried weight. He explained that what we'd all just witnessed was assault and battery. He described the legal definition, the potential consequences, and the fact that it had occurred in front of 250 witnesses. He looked at my sister and told her that her actions had crossed a line from family dispute into criminal behavior. The color drained from her face. Judge Morrison then turned to the crowd and did something unexpected. He summarized what I'd said about the contract, explaining the legal and financial implications of breaking binding agreements. He talked about tortious interference, about how my sister's demands could have exposed me to lawsuits from my clients. He made it clear, in terms everyone could understand, that I hadn't been selfish, I'd been protecting myself from legal disaster. My sister tried to interrupt, to laugh it off again, but her voice cracked. Her new husband stood up and tried to calm the situation, suggesting everyone return to celebrating. But the damage was done. Guests were gathering their things, making excuses, filing out into the night. The wedding was effectively over. I left without saying goodbye to anyone except our parents. My father hugged me and said he was proud of me for standing up for myself. My mother cried and said she was sorry for not seeing the situation clearly. I drove home in a daze, my cheeks still throbbing. Update 1. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Most were from family members who'd heard about the incident secondhand and wanted my version of events. 3 were from my sister, alternating between apologies and accusations. 1 was from a number I didn't recognize. I called the unknown number back. It was Judge Morrison. He apologized for inserting himself into a family matter, but explained that he couldn't stand by and watch assault be normalized as entertainment. He asked if I intended to press charges. I told him I hadn't decided yet. He said he understood, but encouraged me to at least file a police report to create a record of the incident. He gave me his contact information and told me to reach out if I needed anything. I spent the day thinking about what I wanted. Pressing charges against my sister felt nuclear, like burning a bridge I might someday want to cross back over. But letting it go felt like accepting her behavior, like telling her that she could do whatever she wanted without consequences. By evening, I'd made my decision. I filed a police report. Not because I wanted to see my sister arrested, but because Judge Morrison was right. I needed a record. The officer who took my statement was professional and sympathetic. She explained the process, gave me a case number, and said someone would follow up. My sister called while I was at the police station. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail saying I was overreacting, that it was just a slap, that I was going to ruin her marriage over nothing. There was no acknowledgement, no what she'd done, no real apology, that I wasn't making this easier for her. Update 2. A week later, the consequences started rolling in. My sister's husband's family was old money, but they were also old reputation. The scene at the wedding had embarrassed them publicly, and they didn't take embarrassment lightly. I heard through the family grapevine that there had been serious discussions about the incident, about my sister's character, about whether this was the kind of person they wanted associated with their name. Her husband called me. It was awkward and stilted, and he spent most of the call trying to mediate without actually taking a side. He said my sister was sorry, that that she'd been stressed about the wedding, that she never meant for things to get so out of hand. He asked what it would take for me to drop the police report. I told him the truth. The police report wasn't about punishment. It was about documentation. I had no intention of pursuing criminal charges, but I also had no intention of pretending the assault hadn't happened. I told him that if my sister wanted to make amends, she could start by taking actual responsibility instead of making excuses. He went quiet for a moment, then thanked me for my time and hung up. 2 days later, I received a formal letter from my sister. It was written by a lawyer. I could tell immediately from the language. It was an apology in the most technical sense, acknowledging the incident, expressing regret for her actions, committing to anger management counseling. It read like a legal document because that's exactly what it was. Her husband's family had clearly insisted on it, probably as a condition of staying in their good graces. I didn't respond. Update 3. 3 months after the wedding, my sister's marriage was already showing cracks. I didn't hear this directly from her. We hadn't spoken since the incident, but our mother kept me updated despite my requests not to be involved. Apparently, the honeymoon had been a disaster. They'd ended up on a cruise ship instead of a private yacht, and my sister had spent the entire trip bitter and resentful. Her husband's family had grown cold toward her after the wedding incident, no longer including her in family decisions or treating her as an equal member of their dynasty. She'd started therapy, our mother reported, both individually and as a couple. The therapist had apparently suggested that my sister had some deep-seated issues around money, status, and sibling rivalry that needed addressing. Our mother seemed hopeful that this meant growth and change. I was less optimistic. The real turning point came 4 months after the wedding. I received a call from my sister directly, not through our parents or her husband. Her voice was different, smaller, less certain. She asked if we could meet in person. I hesitated, but something in her tone made me agree. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our houses. She looked tired. The polish and confidence I'd seen at the wedding had faded, leaving someone who looked genuinely lost. She didn't make excuses this time. She told me that the therapy had forced her to confront some uncomfortable truths about herself, about how she'd spent her whole life measuring her worth against mine, about how she'd resented my success because she felt like she deserved it more, about how that resentment had twisted into something ugly and destructive. She said she understood if I never forgave her. She said she understood that she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But she wanted me to know that she was working on herself, trying to become someone who didn't need to tear others down to feel valuable. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I sat quietly for a moment, processing. Then I told her that forgiveness wasn't something I could offer immediately, but I appreciated her honesty. I told her that the person who slapped me at her wedding wasn't someone I wanted in my life, but if she was genuinely becoming someone different, maybe someday we could rebuild something. She nodded, tears running down her face, and thanked me for not completely shutting the door. Update 4. It's been almost a year now since the wedding. My sister and I have a tentative relationship that mostly consists of brief text exchanges and the occasional coffee meeting. She's still in therapy, still working through her issues. Her marriage survived, though from what I understand, it's different now, more equal, less about his family's money and more about building something together. Judge Morrison and I stayed in touch. He turned out to be an interesting person with a sharp legal mind and a dry sense of humor. We've had lunch a few times, discussing everything from contract law to sailing. He told me once that he'd been watching my sister throughout the reception, noticing the entitled behavior, the dismissive way she treated service staff, the expectation that the world would bend to her whims. He said he'd been waiting for someone to draw a line, and when I stood up to speak, he'd been ready to support that boundary, however necessary. The yacht charter went off without a hitch, and my clients were thrilled with the experience. They've since referred me to 3 other companies, growing my business in ways I hadn't anticipated. Sometimes I think about how close I came to throwing all of that away just to keep the peace with my sister. The most unexpected consequence came from my parents. The incident forced them to confront their own role in our family dynamics. Our mother admitted that she'd always made excuses for my sister's behavior, smoothing over conflicts and asking me to be the bigger person because it was easier than holding my sister accountable. Our father acknowledged that he'd seen the entitlement growing over the years but hadn't known how to address it without causing family drama. We've all been working on healthier patterns. It's slow and sometimes painful, but it's honest in a way our family dynamics never were before. As for the slap itself, my cheek healed within a few days, but the memory stayed sharp. Sometimes I still feel the sting when I think about it, not physically, but emotionally. It represented every time she'd taken something from me. Every time she'd manipulated a situation to her advantage, every time I'd backed down to keep the peace. That slap was the culmination of 30 years of unbalanced sibling dynamics, and in a strange way, I'm almost grateful for it. It forced everything into the open. It made invisible patterns visible. It gave me permission to stop sacrificing myself on the altar of family harmony. I saw my sister last week. We met at the marina where I keep the yacht. She asked if she could see it, and I agreed. We stood on the deck together, looking out at the ocean, and she told me it was beautiful. She said she understood now why I couldn't just give it away, why it meant something beyond money or status. She said she was starting to understand the difference between earning something and expecting to be given it. I asked her if she wanted to go sailing sometime, maybe just the two of us, no expectations or demands. She looked surprised, then cautiously hopeful, and said she'd like that. We haven't scheduled it yet. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But the offer itself felt important. A small gesture toward a future where we might actually be siblings again, not competitors or enemies, just two people who share a complicated history and are trying to build something better. The wedding feels like it happened in another lifetime, to different people. I suppose in some ways it did. We're all different now, marked by what happened, changed by the consequences, hopefully growing towards something healthier. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how I handled things. They asked if I should have just given her the yacht, avoided the whole scene, kept the peace. I tell them no, because the yacht was never really the issue. It was about respect, boundaries, and the right to protect what I'd built. It was about refusing to let someone else's entitlement dictate my choices. Judge Morrison called it assault and battery. My sister called it a moment of stress. I call it the moment I finally learned that family doesn't mean unconditional surrender. It means holding each other accountable, supporting growth, and sometimes drawing hard lines that force everyone to become better versions of themselves. The slap hurt. The aftermath was messy. But standing there on my yacht with my sister, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, I realized something important. Some bridges need to burn before you can build better ones. Some relationships need to break before they can heal into something real. We're not there yet. Maybe we never will be. But at least now we're being honest about the distance between us, and honest is a start.